At dinner that night, the air was thick, heavy with all the unspoken things my family never said aloud. The kind of tension that settles like dust over every meal. I stared at my plate, pretending to cut the chicken, but my mind was racing. I had rehearsed this moment over and over in my head, every word, every tone. When my brother, the one who had always been the golden child, the favorite, the untouchable, finally smirked at me, I let it happen. I let him speak first because he thrived on that. The control, the superiority he believed he held. "You're really going to show up this year?" he said, voice dripping with mock surprise. "Just tell me when the reunion is. I need to know when to make space for the people who actually matter." I looked up at him, calm, measured, and let my silence stretch. The weight did more damage than any words could. My parents shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. Their favorite son and the daughter they had quietly, if not openly, dismissed for years. I could see the flicker of guilt, the shame they tried to hide. But it was faint, fleeting. "I will go," I said finally, my voice low, but firm. "But not for you. Not for anyone you care about. I will go for me." His smirk faltered just for a second, but I noticed it. That tiny crack was all I needed to feel the surge of control I had been building toward my entire life. He leaned back, pretending to sip his wine, but I saw the tension in his hands. The golden child was not so untouchable anymore. That weekend, I began planning. The reunion was a massive event, held at the local country club. All my family's friends, colleagues, and acquaintances mingling in the grand hall. I had been excluded from all the invitations, the whispers behind my back, the subtle manipulations, but I found a way in. I did not announce myself. I did not send a polite RSVP. I simply arrived, confident, composed, and ready. Walking in, I felt the familiar pang of anxiety mixed with exhilaration. All eyes turned, some in recognition, some in surprise. I saw my brother first, standing near the drinks table, laughing, the perfect image of success and arrogance. He froze when he saw me, and for the first time in decades, I felt a thrill at seeing him unarmed, vulnerable in his own little world. I made my way through the crowd, exchanging polite nods, small smiles. People whispered, curiosity and intrigue glinting in their eyes. My parents were across the room, mid-conversation, but the moment I stepped near, they realized I was here fully, unapologetically, and suddenly their world shifted. My brother tried to approach, feigning charm. "Hey, I did not expect—" "Save it," I said, cutting him off effortlessly. "You know I do not need your approval. I am here because I want to be, not because you think I should be." The crowd sensed the tension, the drama, and it heightened every whisper, every sideways glance. I had become the center, not because I sought attention, but because I exuded control and calm confidence. People who had ignored me, overlooked me, or whispered about me before now watched carefully, curious, cautious. Throughout the evening, I mingled strategically. I sought out people who had once doubted me, those who had written me off, and I shared small, subtle victories, career advancements, investments, my own achievements. Every word, every anecdote was delivered with humility on the surface. But underneath was a quiet declaration. I was not just surviving. I was thriving, and I was untouchable. My brother's attempts to overshadow me failed spectacularly. He tried jokes, casual insults, even subtle comparisons to make the crowd laugh, to regain dominance, but nothing landed. I had become the story people wanted to hear. The quiet, methodical revenge, the transformation from the overlooked sibling to someone commanding attention, had flipped the script entirely. By the end of the night, I had cemented my presence. My parents approached, hesitant, awkward. My father cleared his throat. "We did not realize—" "I know," I said softly, calmly, "and that is precisely the point. I am here now, in full control of my life, my choices, my presence. Not for approval, not for recognition, but because I earned it, and I am not leaving." The look in their eyes was telling. My mother's lips tightened, her hands fidgeting with her clutch. My father's pride clashed with his realization that he had underestimated me for too long. My brother, the once untouchable golden child, remained silent, forced to swallow every ounce of superiority he had carried for years. That night, I did not gloat. I did not make threats. I simply existed, fully, calmly, and victorious. The revenge was complete not because I humiliated them openly, but because I demonstrated that their control, their manipulation, their favoritism had no power over me anymore. I had flipped the dynamic without a single loud confrontation. Weeks later, my brother attempted to reach out, trying to apologize, trying to reclaim some measure of respect. But I had learned patience and strategy. I responded carefully with measured words, making it clear that the past had been lived, but the future was mine to dictate. Every attempt he made to manipulate or guilt me into old patterns failed, because I had anticipated, prepared, and reinforced boundaries that could not be crossed. The psychological warfare that had defined our family for decades became irrelevant. I had dismantled it quietly, systematically, and completely. Every insult, every dismissal, every comparison my family had used to belittle me was now powerless against the life I had built. The calm revenge, the steady accumulation of self-respect and autonomy, had rewritten the narrative entirely. I continued to expand my achievements quietly, subtly, deliberately. Investments, professional successes, social recognition all became silent, victories that my family could witness, but could not touch. My brother's envy became visible in fleeting expressions. My parents' guilt in subtle glances, and yet I never engaged. I simply continued living, thriving, asserting control without confrontation. The ultimate satisfaction came not in confrontation, but in observation. Watching the family who had dismissed me for so long struggle to reconcile their perception with reality was more powerful than any argument. They had built an identity around superiority and control, and I dismantled it simply by living fully, fearlessly, and on my own terms. Months turned into years, and the transformation remained. I had become unshakable, confident, and untouchable. My presence at family gatherings was no longer a source of tension for me, but a quiet reminder to them that power, true power, does not need aggression. It needs patience, strategy, and self-respect. Every holiday, every gathering, every casual family interaction became a subtle reinforcement of boundaries and success. My brother's attempts to regain dominance, my parents' subtle manipulation, even old friends' doubts, all faded against the backdrop of a life fully claimed. The quiet, calculated psychological revenge had achieved something far more enduring than any single act of retaliation could have. I realized then that the ultimate form of revenge is not humiliation, it is transformation. To rise above, to claim autonomy, to live fully without their permission or acknowledgement, is the most devastating victory. They had trained me for confrontation, for fear, for compliance, and I had learned every lesson, but I used it not to fight in their terms, but to live in mine. And as I sit now, reflecting on that night at dinner, on the reunion, on every calculated move I made since, I feel the quiet satisfaction of someone who has reclaimed not just space, respect, or recognition, but the deepest sense of self. I had turned a lifetime of neglect, favoritism, and emotional manipulation into the very foundation of my strength. I know they watch sometimes. I know they whisper. I know my brother still wonders how I transformed from the overlooked sister to the unstoppable woman they now see, but I do not seek acknowledgement, nor do I need reconciliation. The victory is mine, complete, unshakable, and permanent. And the final haunting truth that I carry quietly, but fiercely, is this. They may still speak, they may still act, they may still try, but nothing they do can undo the life I have taken back. The life I have claimed. The life I have thrived in. They may have once dictated my world, but now I am the author of my own story, the silent architect of my revenge, and the unassailable keeper of my peace. The table may be crowded, the holidays may come and go, and the reunions may still occur, but I stand firm. I smile when they look, calm when they whisper, and live fully while they remain trapped in the illusions they built. And in that quiet, inevitable power, I am finally, irrevocably victorious. After that reunion, I knew the real work had just begun. Being present, being seen was not enough. I had to ensure that every ounce of my family's arrogance, every condescending word they had ever thrown at me, every dismissive glance became powerless. It was not about anger or confrontation anymore. It was about strategy, control, and survival. The next morning, I woke up early, alone in my apartment, quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. I sipped my coffee, letting it warm me, letting me plan. I knew my brother would try to recover the upper hand. He always did. And my parents, they were creatures of habit, of patterns, of ego. Their pride was enormous, and I had to dismantle it carefully, silently, without giving them a single clue. I began with the simplest thing, visibility. I documented every achievement, every step forward. I updated my LinkedIn, subtly highlighted promotions, completed projects, and accolades. Every post was crafted to show competence, leadership, and independence. Nothing flashy, nothing obvious. Just undeniable proof that I was not the same person they had tried to erase for years. The subtlety was important. Overreach would be predictable. I needed quiet, inevitable influence. Within a week, I noticed changes. Mutual acquaintances, former family friends, even distant relatives began reaching out. "I saw your new project," one would say casually. "Impressive work." I did not respond immediately, letting the recognition simmer, letting it ripple back to my family through gossip and curiosity. My brother called a few times, innocuous at first, pretending interest. I kept responses brief, polite, but distant. I let him chase approval he had never earned and would never truly have. Then I moved to influence my parents' financial habits. I had learned a lot about their investments, about their prideful tendencies, and about the need they had to show off. I began placing myself strategically, quietly attending events where they showcased their wealth, volunteering for causes that mattered to them socially, joining boards, establishing connections. Every action was calculated to demonstrate independence and capability. My presence, quietly powerful, contrasted sharply with their expectations of me. The first major confrontation came 6 months later. My father, who had always been the more imposing of the two, sent an email thinly veiled in politeness, asking if I would attend a dinner to discuss family matters. I recognized the pattern immediately. This was an attempt to draw me into their control. I accepted, not because I wanted to confront them, but because I wanted to observe, to assess, to gather data. The dinner was tense. My mother smiled carefully, her eyes betraying just a flicker of fear. My father spoke about trivialities, the weather, the stock market, pretending to ignore the elephant in the room, me. My brother tried to insert himself into every conversation, trying desperately to regain authority, to remind everyone that he was the successful one, the favored child. I listened, nodded politely, and spoke sparingly. Every word I chose was deliberate. Every silence was calculated. Finally, my father made a misstep. "It is impressive," he said, turning to my brother mid-sentence. "How she seems to have caught up. But do you think it is sustainable? Can she maintain it?" I smiled softly, almost imperceptibly. "It is sustainable," I said calmly, and then paused. "Because unlike some people, I am not relying on someone else's validation. I built this myself, and I will continue to build it, with or without approval." The room went quiet. My mother's hand twitched. My brother froze mid-sentence, and even my father, the architect of decades of manipulation, seemed momentarily unmoored. That moment, the tiny, quiet victory, was worth every year of humiliation, every insult, every whisper. From there, I escalated strategically. I bought a small condo, invested in a portfolio my father had dismissed years ago, and started sharing details subtly with mutual acquaintances, not in bragging, but in casual, matter-of-fact ways. I noticed how quickly news traveled back home. My brother's arrogance began to falter. He could no longer dominate conversations or claim superiority because my life had begun to outshine his achievements, quietly, organically, undeniably. I started attending social gatherings they had always controlled. I did not announce myself beforehand. I arrived poised, calm, confident. People whispered, some recognized me, others asked who I was. By the time my parents noticed, it was too late. The narrative had shifted. I had become the story, the subtle center of attention, without saying a single word about revenge or confrontation. One afternoon, I received a phone call that would test everything I had built. My brother, frustrated, called me directly. His tone was sharp, almost accusatory. "You have to stop. People are talking. Our friends, the neighbors, everyone thinks you've outshined me. This isn't how things are supposed to be." I laughed softly, without malice, but with complete control. "I did not outshine you," I said. "I simply lived my life. That is all anyone can do. You may feel threatened, but that is a reflection of your own insecurity, not my actions." He hung up furious, and I smiled. That conversation solidified my psychological advantage. I had become untouchable not by confrontation, but by living fully, by thriving silently, by letting their arrogance dismantle itself in the face of my calm resilience. Weeks later, my parents attempted to reclaim influence. They invited me to family trips, gatherings, and events, hoping to sway me, to lure me back into the old patterns of compliance. I attended selectively, always calm, always in control. I watched how they maneuvered, the desperation in their eyes growing as I remained unaffected. Autonomous, composed. At one of these events, a particularly loaded family dinner, my brother tried once again. "You know," he said, smirking, "some of us have worked for decades to get where we are, and yet here you are, suddenly in the spotlight. Must be nice." I looked at him, steady, measured. "It is nice," I said simply. "Nice to be free from control, free from comparison, and free from the need to prove myself to people who never valued me. That is true success." The quiet in the room was deafening. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Aware of the shift in power, the reversal of expectations, my parents exchanged a glance, realizing for the first time that the game had changed. They could no longer define me, belittle me, or manipulate me. I was untouchable in ways they could not grasp. Over the next year, I focused on consolidating my life, financially, socially, professionally. I purchased additional properties, expanded investments, and strengthened connections. Each achievement was subtle, measured, quietly visible to my family without ostentation. Every small success chipped away at the lingering control they thought they held. My brother tried multiple times to sabotage, to manipulate, to draw me into old conflicts. Each attempt failed. I had learned patience, strategy, and discipline. I responded calmly, politely, strategically. Every attempt he made to assert dominance only highlighted my independence and resilience. Then came the ultimate test. My parents decided to throw a grand family celebration, inviting distant relatives, old family friends, and social acquaintances, all designed to reinforce their prestige and dominance. I arrived unannounced, as always. The surprise of my presence, the calm confidence I exuded, shifted the room immediately. I watched as my brother fumbled, as my parents struggled to maintain composure, as old friends whispered with intrigue and curiosity. During the evening, I casually shared details of my professional achievements, my investments, my lifestyle. Nothing boastful, nothing aggressive, but undeniable in its clarity. Every anecdote, every piece of information was a quiet assertion. I had succeeded. I had thrived. I was independent, powerful, and untouchable. By the end of the night, the psychological shift was complete. My family, the very people who had belittled me for decades, who had dismissed me, ignored me, or undermined me, could no longer claim authority over my narrative. They watched, powerless, as I navigated the room with calm confidence, as acquaintances and friends sought my attention, as my life became the story they could no longer control. Months turned into years. The quiet, methodical, psychological victory remained intact. My parents never fully recovered the sense of control they once had. My brother remained bitter, struggling with envy and insecurity. I, however, continued to thrive, live, and build. I had achieved the ultimate revenge, not through confrontation, not through anger, not through humiliation, but through transformation. I had turned every insult, every dismissal, every manipulation into a foundation for power. I had become the architect of my own life, untouchable and unshakable. The calm, strategic revenge, the life I had built in silence and patience, was more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation could have been. And so I live now fully, deliberately, free from their control, their judgment, their manipulation. I attend family events selectively with calm confidence. I thrive professionally, financially, socially, and emotionally. My life, my independence, and my quiet power serve as the ultimate proof that I am not the child they once dismissed. I am the master of my own story, and I have rewritten the rules entirely. Even when they speak, when they try, when they maneuver, nothing they do touches me anymore. I have claimed my space, my life, my power, and nothing, not guilt, not manipulation, not comparison, can take it away. I have become unassailable, and I know, in the quiet of my victories, in the calm assertion of my life, that this is the most complete, enduring, and satisfying revenge of all. The final truth is simple. They may have raised me, they may have shaped my early world, but they do not define my life anymore. I always did. And in that certainty, I find a quiet, absolute, and permanent victory.